Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
And welcome in, everybody. New little bumper there for you to celebrate another Chiefs championship. Holy moly. Welcome into Sports Daily. Chiefs fans, how you feeling this morning? Another one. They get another one. Man, what a game. Overtime in the Super Bowl, Tommy. Holy smokes. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers producing. How are you feeling this morning as a Chiefs fan?
I'm a little tired this morning, but it's incredibly worth it, man. I know we're going to talk about it the entire show, break down everything from the game, our thoughts on the dynasty, all of that. I'm just grateful, man. I'm grateful for another championship. It wasn't that long ago that all of us in Chiefs Kingdom, we never thought we'd ever see one from this team, and we've gotten 3 in 5 years. So incredibly grateful, glad to be here today.
Yeah, 3 in 5 years, been to 4 of them. It has been a remarkable run. There is so much about the legacy in this game and everything about it. You had 2 basically game-winning drives, right? One to send it to overtime and then one in overtime. There's strategy talk involved in overtime. There are, individual plays in the game to talk about, just so much. It was just a blast to watch it. And even, the first half, which was not pretty, was interesting, right? It was an interesting first half, if nothing else. And then the second half really took off. You saw record-breaking field goals twice in the game. You had all the celebrity and pop and fanfare of Taylor Swift and her entourage. Like, all of it was so much fun. I woke up. My kids didn't stay. I had to work last night because we had the game on Kwitch. And I got this morning, I was getting the kids ready. And I'm like, the Chiefs won and they were so excited. And then I was like, and Taylor Swift gave Travis Kelce a kiss on the after the game. And they were just like giggling and like, oh, he kissed her, so now they're engaged, right? They're getting married. And I'm like, well, no. That's not like they're not, just like their interest in all of it has been really, really fun to watch too. It was a fun season. I know it was a frustrating season for Chiefs fans at some points, but that just added to the drama of this game. Mahomes and the Chiefs as underdogs win it again. Shanahan, again, can't get it done and blows a double-digit Super Bowl lead. I feel so bad for them and him more specifically coming out of this. We'll get into all of it. 869-1240 is the KFH hotline for you to chime in. We'll still have some giveaways. We'll give away some HTO later in the show. We'll take your calls. But, yeah, we're going to spend the day on the Chiefs. We'll get into the college hoops from the weekend and all that later this week. But, it's the post-mortem of a season, Tommy, that took you on an emotional roller coaster, that's for sure. And, I saw a lot of, well, this is by far the worst Chiefs team. And, they had the hardest path by metrics ever for a team to go win a Super Bowl in the postseason. And I do take some pause to that, Tommy. I don't think this was the worst. I don't know that in the aftermath of all of this, the defense still gets enough credit. Like, this was the best Chiefs defense by far of this Mahomes era, right? It was as good as their special teams has ever been. The offense just wasn't as good. But this team, like, once it redefined itself, and it stuck to the formula last night, it really did. There were times where people are like, oh, they're going to go for it. And I'm like, I don't think they are, guys. I think they're going to take field goal. Like, look at the way their defense is playing. And so I don't totally agree with that. I don't agree that this was the worst Chiefs team, right? It was the worst group of wide receivers. It wasn't the worst offensive line that they've ever had. It was the best defense that they've ever had. And I'm talking about just in this era, right? And so I'm not totally in on that. It was just, what's remarkable to me about it is it's been so different now for all 3 of the Super Bowls.
The range of emotions that I felt last night during the game, it was like a microcosm of the entire season. The range of emotions throughout the entire year. Because in the first half of the Super Bowl, you saw all the things that the Chiefs struggled with early on in the season. You saw the mistakes and the penalties and the turnovers. There was a dropped pass by Justin Watson at one point in the game. So that showed up. All of these other things that had reared its ugly head and bubbled up throughout the season that made this year so frustrating for the Kansas City Chiefs, they showed up again in the first half of the Super Bowl. even the tensions boiling over on the sidelines. We saw that on Christmas Day against the Raiders. That happened before in this season. It happened in the first half of the Super Bowl. The tensions blew up on the sideline. And I, for one, was worried that Kansas City was losing composure and unraveling in the first half. And then all of a sudden, things started to change. The tide started to turn in the second half in the same way that for the entire season, the fortunes of Kansas City started to change once they got into the playoffs. And so I think that is, when you, from the start of this Super Bowl game all the way to the very end, like I mentioned, it's a microcosm of the way this entire regular season played out for Kansas City. Very frustrating, but then at the end of the day, extremely rewarding.
Yeah, look, I can't imagine a more rewarding experience for fans. I mean, it would have been more rewarding, I suppose, for the 49ers fans last night, who, for me, now still have not won a Super Bowl more recently than the Cowboys. For my own personal selfish reasons, that's nice to see. But yeah, look, the Chiefs, they take this in a way for the entire season, and it's not like they were making mistakes. It really was sort of a microcosm, right? Because you had a key fumble. You had an interception by Mahomes. You had little things happening, but the defense bailed them out, right? Bailed them out enough to where the offense just stuck to it, took some field goals when it needed to, when it could have in the past maybe taken some other opportunities. And it turned out that was enough at the end of the game. And the key plays, right, made by Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco with some key plays, Patrick Mahomes' legs, even Rashee Rice. The only difference now is you got a couple of big plays from the wide receivers who had burned you all year. MVS had one big mistake, go running backwards on a play, but, the McCole Hardman redemption story is great. The MVS redemption story, has been well documented and good. Both of those guys are probably gone next year, but it was really fun to see that this year. The emotion of Chris Jones, the emotion of Andy Reid, the emotion within the game of Travis Kelce losing his cool. Like, all of those things were what were happening in the regular season, but they stuck to it. And they stuck to it because they had one of the best defenses in football. They were missing a key player. Spagnuolo, it should have been the Super Bowl MVP. I mean, honestly, I don't think that this wasn't the case of Baltimore. I think San Francisco, I think their game plan was fine. They probably could have run it just a little bit more in the third quarter. But, I mean, Christian McCaffrey touched the ball 30 times, right? I think that, and we'll get into the overtime specifically in a segment because it was the first time we had seen it. I think the initial reaction is worse than reality to that decision. We'll get into why as I've looked at that and kind of tried to read up on it a little bit. But I mean, if we're being honest, like when they started overtime and somebody asked me, I'm like, well, no. And I'd forgotten they changed the rule. We haven't seen it before. And then we're going through that. And I'm like, guys, I totally forgot that they changed this. I don't know how this works. Like, we've never seen it. Like, I don't remember. I'm trying to figure it out as it's happening. It was a wild experience for us. Now, obviously the coaches know it. It turns out maybe some of the San Francisco players didn't know as much. The Chiefs players certainly did. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later. It's just wild that much happened within that game. I do think this was the best Super Bowl matchup we could have had. I do feel terrible for Kyle Shanahan because his haters are going to be even stronger than ever. And, it was just a heavyweight bout with stars all over the field and Mahomes magic. He accounted for something like 88% of the Chiefs offense after halftime. I mean, it's wild. It's wild to see it happen and take it for granted because you just know it's Brady is what it is, Tommy. Like, that's what it is. Like, the Chiefs, and I saw a lot of people with the voodoo magic after the game, like a ball hitting a player on the foot on a punt return, like all the little silly things that have to happen that people used to get so frustrated that would happen within the Patriots. But the reason I think those things happen in every game both ways, the Chiefs just capitalize on it. And they have these ultimate competitors at key spots. Chris Jones on the last pressure for San Francisco to force that field goal in overtime. I mean, that's Spags and Jones at their best. Like, their big players made big plays all game long. And it's just wild to think that we had this Patriots dynasty like we've never seen before. We're like, we're never going to see this again. And we're seeing it again immediately. Like and I just like, that is so incredible. It had been 20 years since a team went back to back. I honestly did not think we'd ever see anything like what the Patriots did ever again. And the Chiefs are doing that. That's what they're doing right now. It's crazy.
You mentioned the Kyle Shanahan haters. I think the one area that those haters are right today about Kyle Shanahan is the worst thing that they did, the 49ers did, was in the process of the Chiefs playing so horribly in the half that the 49ers didn't pull away. And they weren't able to put their foot on the throat of the Chiefs. And the fact that it was still a game at halftime and into the third quarter, that was probably the biggest mistake, I think, that Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers made, not being able to pull away from Kansas City when they had the opportunity to. They let the Chiefs hang in there and ultimately take the lead in the third quarter and then force it to overtime and then, win the game overall. I want to come here today, and you have to understand how hard this is for me to say this. But I got to come here today and I got to give you your props. That's really difficult for me to say. I don't know if I've ever done this in the year and a half we've done this show, but throughout this entire season, when I've been freaking out and I've been so frustrated by this team and so upset by what has happened with them throughout the season, you have been steady the entire time in saying things like, as long as they've got 15, as long as they've got 87, as long as they've got the best defense in the NFL, and as long as they've got Andy Reid, they're going to be okay. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't believe you. In that really bad stretch in late November through December, that Christmas Day game was the icing on the cake for me, and I thought they were done. I didn't believe you. I got mad at you. I'm like, stop saying that because it's not true. It's not going to happen.
I think
they've got all these issues.
I think you thought I was trying to troll you. And I'm like, no.
I thought you were. I genuinely thought you were. But I got to give you your flowers this morning because you were steady in that process. And when push came to shove on the biggest moment of them all, it came down to 15. And 15 put that team on his back, and he willed them to victory. And you mentioned Tom Brady. That's what Tom Brady did throughout his entire career. The only other quarterback to ever do that is Patrick Mahomes. Well,
this year it came down to 15. It also came down to the defense because they did have to bail the offense out consistently, even within this game. But it's so on that one, I'll say this in humility. It's easier to see that when you're not a Chiefs fan, right? I think that when you're a fan of it and you're so used to what you've been used to and you're so emotionally invested in it, it's more frustrating than when you're just observing it happen and you can see the other things also happening. The biggest thing to remember in all of this is the NFL season is long. It is such a long season. What's happening in week 8 is almost never relevant. You're lucky if you can keep it relevant just with an escape a major injury, a catastrophic injury to derail your season. It has been pretty remarkable that the Chiefs have been able to stay mostly healthy with their very key players through this run, holistically. But when you're seeing, and we've seen it with the Chiefs before too. Last year, Tommy, the Chiefs had to make adjustments to the way that they, played offensively without Tyreek Hill. I mean, it took some time. We've seen this team go through bad stretches lots of times. And so it's just that Patrick Mahomes gives you that, and so did Tom Brady. But there's a lot of quarterbacks that have been successful no matter what's around them historically, right? Like, you don't really remember bad years for Aaron Rodgers. You don't remember bad years for Peyton Manning. You don't remember bad years for Dan Marino. Like, there have been a lot of quarterbacks who have made their team much better than they are. It's this combination for the Chiefs. And of course it's Mahomes. And I would tell you this, and this, we can also get into this discussion. I think that if you had 10 out of 10 general managers in a redraft of every quarterback that's ever played in their prime, I think all 10 are taking Mahomes. And I know people are like defending Brady and he's not the go, but the reality is, like, Mahomes is more physically gifted and is showing us, the longer this goes out, that whatever that intangible thing is, right? Like that Brady and Jordan and that thing, Mahomes clearly has that too. So it's fine to think Mahomes is the best quarterback that's ever played. If you want to call him the GOAT, you might want to wait for some championships. I think that's fine. But as far as just like the best player that's ever played it, he's there. And he just does these unbelievable things that we've seen. But when you have him, you can sort of wait, right? And say, just remember everything you've ever seen about him playing football. They're probably going to be there when they need to be. And then, so when they get there, right, what do you think is going to happen? And my point back all the way then was like, you got to chill. They're going to make the playoffs, right? Like they're not a bad team. They're just playing bad. They're going to be in the playoffs. And you got to think about it in that spot, like that he's going to be in the playoffs with the best defense in football, barring major injury, right? That's going to be hard to beat. And I don't care how poorly they're playing. Like they could play poorly. There were times that they didn't play well in that game last night, but when the defense can bail you out like that, and they're going to attack these deficiencies in the offseason, and they'll be better offensively next year than they were this year, and they'll be worse next year defensively than they were this year. But we've seen them at different times in this little dynasty that they've built now do it in different ways, that this was just a different way. I think it took them longer to embrace it than it has historically, but they got there. And but it's not just him, right? It's also Travis Kelce, and it's also Andy Reid, and it's also Chris Jones. Like they have Hall of Famers all over this team. It's Mahomes, it's Kelce, it's Reid, it's Jones. Like they've got big time players. Yeah, I mean he's as good as it is in this kind of a spot. Right? In the postseason, as an underdog facing a great offense, there's not a coordinator alive that you'd rather have in that spot. It's just what he does. And so none of it is surprising to me. I don't think it is to anybody now, but I think most Chiefs fans probably would have been. Tom, you weren't the only one freaking out. Like I was getting it from everywhere. Like this team is terrible. Like this team ain't doing anything. And I'm like, God, and it won't happen again. I mean, I can tell you that right now. Like, it will not happen again. I don't care how poorly they're playing in week 8. I don't think Chiefs fans will ever again say, this team's not doing anything. It's the old Brady thing. Just get to the postseason. Let's just get to the postseason and see what happens. And then you're not, doing anything. I hope everybody made some money this Super Bowl. I think probably they did. I can't imagine people were picking the 49ers around here. So it was good betting night. The under held, Tommy, which was a bit of a sweat, but it was there. It took overtime to sweat it, but the under was the right way. I think we read that game pretty well. We had a pretty good feel for it. Let's talk about the overtime thing when we come back. There's a lot I want to get into. The Mahomes legacy, the Chiefs' future next year, I think is very interesting. Like right this second to see what's happening. We'll get into all of it, but we're going to go to the overtime portion of this. Right away, because the initial reaction is Kyle Shanahan's a bonehead for taking the ball first. I don't think that's the case. I think that there's a lot of validity to what he did. We'll get into that when we return on Sports Daily 869-1240. It's a celebration show too, Chiefs Kingdom. You can call in and party on if you're still feeling that buzz. Albracht and Castor will come back with more Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back in, everybody. It's a Chiefs Celebration Monday, another Super Bowl. The dynasty is without question now. Is it, is Mahomes the greatest and all of these things? We'll get into all of that. Overtime, though, is where we want to go. It was a really interesting experience for overtime in the Super Bowl here. It had been a while. But they changed the rules, and they changed the rules because of the Buffalo game a few years ago. Jason points out a thank you, he says, to the Bills to get those rules changed. They changed them because of the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs take advantage in a Super Bowl. But did they really take advantage? So again, that experience for me was like I don't know these rules yet. We haven't seen them, and I don't remember. It's been a while. I kept saying, I think it might be like the college thing, but that's not it at all. They basically just like start the game over. Both teams get a possession. No matter what happens, both teams get a possession. Keep that in mind. And they play them out as like quarters. And, if both teams, if for whatever reason the game is tied after the second possession, after both teams have possessed the ball, then it becomes, a situation where the first team is in control of things. So Shanahan chooses to take the ball. I think that surprised us all in the moment. I think it surprised us all after the game. And then this narrative comes through that Shanahan doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And that was a crazy mistake. And he got caught off guard and all these things. But I think that's when social media runs wild. Back in March, a guy named Brian Burke, who works for ESPN, ran a bunch of simulations. It was right when the rule was rolled out. He ran a bunch of simulations on what would happen in overtime. The reality is the team taking it first has a less than 1% advantage of doing that. So there's a lot of things that go into that strategy. And I've been like, this fascinates me, right? Because it was on the biggest stage in the biggest moment. I think a couple of things for Shanahan. One, it was like maybe his defense is gassed and he doesn't want to put them right back out there. Like, I could see that. Two, you get the ball third, which is what matters, right? Like you would be able to get it third in that potential scenario, which I think also, which is what he said after the game, after they looked into the analytics and everything, is they saw that as their advantage. The thing that makes it difficult to process, I think, for me and for a lot of people but if you take it first, you're allowing the second team to dictate the game, much like you would in the old overtime rules, because the second team knows what it has to accomplish. If for some reason you don't score, they know they just need a field goal. They also have the advantage of going for it and knowing they need to go for it every time on fourth down, because and that's not as obvious. Like, you might say, well, the first team's going to know they're going to want to score and go for it. No, because they can punt, right? They may not go for it on fourth down to try and pin you down there. But then the second team knows that they have to go for it. That's an advantage to pick up those first downs. They also get and this is what the Chiefs players talked about. So I think one thing that we're learning through what the players had to say after the game is that the Chiefs were more prepared for this at a player level, right? The San Francisco players didn't know what to expect. The Chiefs players didn't. Chris Jones said after the game, like, we were going to go for two. Like, if San Francisco had scored a touchdown, we talked about this in the preseason. As soon as they changed the rules, if we get into this situation, we're going to go for two if we score on that second. So it wouldn't have mattered, right? That third position. Now, Kyle Shanahan doesn't know that, but the computers, like, it is almost dead even. That's why people liked this overtime rule set to begin with, because there is really not an advantage to go either way. Like, there are so many little things either way that it's fine. I don't like the notion, like at the beginning of the game, if I was the Chiefs in this game, this would have been a game I would have taken the ball first. When they had the option, when they deferred, I'd have taken the ball first based on the way that they play football. So in this overtime, when Shanahan takes all this heat, as you look at it and go back when the rules were set out, there really isn't anything wrong with his decision. He didn't know that the Chiefs said after the game they were going to go for two. He doesn't know that. And even if he does, 2-point conversions are 50-50 at best anyway. So is that putting yourself in a better position to win if they do go for two? Maybe. You take control out of your hands. There's no guarantee they convert on that 2-point conversion. How great are the Chiefs in short yardage, I would ask you? Not very, right? And so I think that is getting overblown because we're just so used to, if you win the toss, you take the ball second, right? You take the ball last. I think that's ingrained in our heads. But I think there are a lot of reasons you might want to take it first. I think the simplest is his defense just had to defend that game-winning drive. Let them catch their breath, right? I don't, the little things like you can't give Mahomes the ball last, all that stuff. Like, it took some pretty Herculean fourth down conversions, one in particular, and some third and longs to get down there. So I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was fine. Well, I thought I had a problem with it. I was confused by it in the beginning. As I've thought about it and read up on it, I don't have a problem with it now. I think it was a fine decision to take the ball first.
The only thing I was confused about was the clock situation. And as it's running down, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Call a timeout. What are you doing? That was the only thing that I was really confused about. I didn't realize that it would just go to the next overtime period and let them finish out the possession. I disagree with you, though, about Shanahan. And the reason why is that throughout that entire game, up to that point in regulation, the only drive that Kansas City got into the end zone from was a muffed punt and a short field for the Chiefs. That was the only time. Now, they had marched down the field a couple of times before, but it always resulted in field goals. It always resulted in Harrison Butker kicking for 3. And so the 49ers defense, I understand that they were just on the field, but they had done a really good job. And Nick Bosa in particular had done a really good job at limiting Kansas City from getting into the end zone in regulation. So if Kyle Shanahan had deferred and gotten the ball second in overtime, if I'm Shanahan, I've got faith that my defense can do what they've done the entire game and keep Kansas City out of the end zone. Even if they give up 3, then at that point, the Niners get the ball back. They know exactly what they need, and they can try to march down with Christian McCaffrey and everybody else, get into the end zone and win the game. That's the only thing. So I understand. And like, I know that thought process. Chris Jones talked about how they knew exactly how they were going to play it all the way back in the preseason if they got to that point. I understand that. And maybe the Niners, maybe Kyle Shanahan had an idea in his mind.
I think he did.
What he wanted to do even before the game if it got to that point. But in that moment, after seeing what your defense has done the entire game, man, if I'm Shanahan, I'm blowing it all up and I'm saying, we want the ball second, give Mahomes the ball first, because we've stopped him from getting in the end zone outside of a muffed punt and a short field.
I think so much of it is dependent on your team, right? Like I think that there are definitely advantages to the Chiefs getting the ball second, just because it's you know that Mahomes is going to have to make a play on a 4th down, which he did in that drive, right? But even giving them the ball, like, you still, because of what you just said, like your defense's chances of holding them to a field goal, right, when they get down there. And they made the big plays right there at the very end. But that same defense that had held them in check didn't keep them out of the end zone on that particular drive. Do you think that if the Chiefs had the ball first and faced that 4th and 1, what do you think they would have done? Do you think they would have gone for it, or do you think they would have taken a field goal? I don't remember where they were on.
They wouldn't have been. They weren't in field goal range. No.
So would they have punted? You think they would have punted? Because I don't.
I think at that moment in overtime, no. I think they would have went for it. I think they would have.
So they did that anyway, right? So they. Yeah. So I honestly, I don't think, because they went down and they scored a touchdown. I don't think anything that happened in the Chiefs' second drive would not have happened had they had the ball first. So what you just said really, I mean, it presented itself anyway. They were 4th and 1, and I was proud of myself. I called that one out loud. I was like, play action, roll out right. Play action, roll out right, because you were going to have Kelsey on an option or Mahomes was just going to run it. And that's exactly what they ran, which it just was a great play call. I mean, after watching the way San Francisco was defending, that was the only call to make. And
in a play that, could end your season right then and there, right. You're not taking the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands.
Right. Play action, roll out right. And so they would have done that anyway. I just don't think it mattered, right? I don't know that there was a correct answer. I get the logic of both. Giving Mahomes the ball last does seem like a death wish, right? But they had to go down and they had to score the touchdown. They knew they had to go, but I think they would have gone for it on that 4th down anyway. That's the only thing that was even. Otherwise, they would have marched down the field and scored a touchdown either way. Now, you can say San Francisco would have known that they had to score a touchdown.
Flip it the other way. I mean, the Niners had
then they
3rd and 4 in the red zone that they didn't get, and then they kicked the field goal. Had it been flipped around, they would have known they had to get into the end zone. They would have went for it at that point.
But there's no guarantee you're going to get it either, right? And so it's a difficult thing, but it is a good overtime. Like, I really like it. I like that there is not a clear advantage on how you do it, because also consider this. Had the Chiefs not, like, the Chiefs scored a touchdown, it wasn't like they went for it on 4th down on the touchdown. They probably would have kicked a field goal. I don't know that, unless they were down like at the goal line, I don't know that they would have gone for it. I think they would have kicked a field goal, and then Shanahan's strategy, and this is where the analytics have it so even, then they get the ball back, right? Then you're getting your chance. And so I get it. I understand it. And their defense had played well too. I think you're relying on your defense when you take the ball first to make the stop after you go do whatever it is that you need to do, or worst case scenario, if you have to punt, you're trusting your defense at that point. I don't have a problem with it. Their defense was gassed. They had just had the deflating drive on Mahomes. Like the psychological aspect of it, I understand. You let your defense catch its breath, get re-energized. I think it's a coin flip. I do not think it was so egregious or that big a deal. I am fascinated by the strategy of it. Now I want this to be the all the time overtime rule so I can get a better gauge of what I think should be the right way to play it. But I think the reality of it is it's going to matter who the teams are. I think it will depend so much on the flow of a game, on who the teams are, on who the quarterbacks are, on who the coaches are, that it'll go back and forth. And I think that's why those computer models found it that way when it first came out, is because it's intricate. It's as good an overtime scenario as you can think up. And man, it made that one of the better Super Bowls we've seen because it was that fascinating down to the wire.
The worst thing about the best game on this planet is that there's a potential that games can end in ties. And if you implement this new overtime system in the regular season, you're not going to have ties anymore. I mean, unless you're playing a full other game and it comes down to the wire and the teams end up in a tie, that it's not going to happen that way when it's sudden death and all of that after the first two possessions. So I think that, I'm with you. I think that's something that needs to be implemented throughout the entire NFL for the entire year. But you know what? There's a lot of hand wringing about overtime this morning. But you know what? I think that the most critical play of the game, it happened in regulation. I think the most critical play of the game was the 3rd and 4 when the Niners had the ball and they could have ran the clock all the way down and did exactly to the Chiefs what the Chiefs did to the Eagles last year in the Super Bowl, run the clock basically all the way down, keep the ball out of the hands of Patrick Mahomes, kick a game-winning field goal. Steve Spagnuolo came up with an incredible blitz play and was able to get, I think it was Trent McDuffie, clear and get pressure on Brock Purdy. Bad throw, 4th down, field goal, and then the Chiefs get the ball to go down and kick the game-tying field goal. That was the play of the game. And of course, everything with overtimes being talked about today for a lot of different reasons, that was the play of the game right there.
That's a good point, and it is. There were so many of those in the game, within the game, and that's what makes
you don't make
Chiefs
that
so
play.
Hard.
The Niners run the clock all the way down to nothing because the Chiefs only had, I think, one timeout at that point to stop the clock. And then at that point, you've got Jake Moody kicking a field goal to win the game. And the Niners
and they would have had some time to only need a field goal. I mean, the Chiefs would what would they have had? I don't even remember the amount. It's tough because then you're trying to be aggressive and make your play and win the game, right? You're trying to, so we can second guess it obviously because we have the result in hand, right? We know that, and the Chiefs made those plays to have this outcome. They're hard to beat in these moments. They're hard to beat, and they made their share of mistakes too, right? Like they did everything they could do to give San Francisco an opportunity. I hate that this is going to be a part of Shanahan's legacy. It's more about Mahomes' legacy to me than it is Shanahan's. Mahomes did this to another coach last year. He did the same thing to the Eagles, right? He tore their hearts out and stomped all over it. Like this is what he's become. He's becoming Tom Brady, and that part of his legacy, which is a dynasty now. You can't argue that. Will it be the greatest? We can, take a swing at that. I think that's a hard thing to guess at right now. What are the chances they can get to that 6 Super Bowls before Mahomes is done? We'll touch on that next when we return to Sports Daily. All right. Tommy, this was as tough a path historically as we've seen a team have to go through, and the Chiefs went through it. It has a lot of people wondering, right, why they can't challenge it. I think that they can. They're going to be one of the odds-on favorite every year with Mahomes there. The legacy is there, right? It's a dynasty already. Like it's not the Patriots yet. It's not the Patriots dynasty, but it's now ahead of what I thought was probably the best team we've seen over a stretch, which is the Cowboys. I don't know about the Steelers in the 70s. I can't tell you. I didn't see it because it's hard for me to compare them. But of the others that we've seen, where it was the mid-90s Cowboys and all the Hall of Famers all over the field, whether it was the Patriots in totality, it was not. I think it's now got to be ahead of the Cowboys. And so it's right there. It's a dynasty. It's a full-blown dynasty. It's what's the craziest thing is, like, what is there that tells you it's not gonna keep going, right? It's if this year wasn't a year where it didn't, and look, they're not going to win the Super Bowl every year. We've seen them lose a Super Bowl. We've seen them not make a Super Bowl in that same stretch, right? Tom Brady how many did Brady make it to? 10. So it's not like they're going to go in there and win it every year. They're just going to be in a position to do it, and that increases your chances, right? I almost came in, and I checked this right before, and I think I got the Chiefs at 6-1 this year before the season. It's a nice winning bet last night. I think they're 5.5 or 6.5 to 1 again to open next year. So it just tells you, like, even Vegas isn't going to just be ridiculous with their juice. Like, they're still going to try to get you to bet the Chiefs and give you those odds because it's hard to win a Super Bowl. But can they get 3 more, which is what it would take, in the next probably at least 10 years? Just, that's the way you have to look at it now. If you assume Mahomes plays till he's about 40, just about 10 more seasons, can they get 3 more in 10 seasons? Chances seem good. They're decent, maybe. I'd say if you had to make me pick, does Mahomes get 6 Super Bowls? That feels like the right number. Can he get to 7? I would say no. Can he get to 6? I would say I'll call it at least a 50% chance that he can. And it may be better than that, but there's going to be a lot of turnover. Like, he's going to lose Kelsey before he gets the opportunity to do that. He's probably going to lose Reed before he gets the opportunity to do that. It's going to have to be a reinvention thing. Remember how many years the Patriots went between 3 and 4? Was it 10 years that they went between 3 and 4?
Was it 10? It was quite a few. I don't remember if it was a full 10 years, but it was quite a bit of time. I think that you have to go outside of football to really have a good comparison of what this is. I mentioned it last week. This is not, in my opinion, the Patriots Brady dynasty. This is the Jordan and Bulls dynasty of the 90s. I truly believe that. Patrick Mahomes is Michael Jordan. And I think that what we're seeing right now, the reason for that, because remember, the Bulls won 3 in a row, then MJ retired, then he won 3 in a row again when he came back, and it was almost a completely different team. He had some of the same supporting guys. Scottie Pippen was still there, all of that. But it was a complete reinvention. And the team was different in 1997 than it was in 1991, right? And so I think that this is what we're probably going to see from Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs moving forward. There's a good chance that that 6th or 7th Super Bowl, 8, 9, 10 years from now, the team will look completely different than it does right now, but you still got Patrick Mahomes. And the future is secure for this franchise long term. Yeah, you're right. They're not going to win the Super Bowl every single year, but your future is secure as long as you've got 15, and the Chiefs have been locked up forever. So I think that's going to be part of it, is that I think you have to look at it separate from the way like the Patriots dynasty was, because it was always Brady and Belichick. You hit the nail on the head. Reed is probably going to be gone sooner rather than later. And so I think the team is going to look different when Patrick Mahomes is 38 compared to now when he's 28. I think you have to look back to the way the Bulls dynasty was.
I think that's what the Patriots were too, though. It was 10 years. It was so the Patriots got theirs in 01, 3, and 4, which is just so funny how comparable that is to what the Chiefs have done, right? Almost the exact same stretch of years. And then it was not until 2014, 14, 16, and 18. So in between there, they reached and lost the Super Bowl in both 2007 and 2011, and then they lost it in 2017. But the similarities are striking for the Chiefs and the Patriots. You had 19, 22, and 23. You had 2001, 3, and 4 for the Patriots, but then it was 10 years.
I don't think there's going to be a 10-year gap.
Well, I don't either, but Brady and Belichick were together for all 20 whatever of those years. That won't be the case for Reed and Kelsey. I mean, Reed, Kelsey, and Mahomes. And so that's what makes it really hard for me to definitively say, yes, I think they're going to get there. I don't know if they're going to get there. And they're going to be in a position to get there, I think. Like, I think they'll play in enough Super Bowls to get there for sure. Will they play? So if you ask me, will the Chiefs play in 3 more Super Bowls over the next 10 years? I would say yes. There's a very strong chance of that. But are they going to win 3? I think about the last 2 that they have won and how razor thin that's been. I mean, if the conspiracy theorists are right, these players deserve an Oscar, right? Because there's no way any of this is predetermined. It's just so good and compelling. I love it. Next year's going to be tough. Let's talk about the immediate future for the Chiefs. Sounds like Reed coming back. Sounds like Kelsey coming back. So what does that mean for him next year? And everyone's immediate reaction is, oh, they're going to be so much better. I don't know if that's the case. It's a daunting free agency that they've got ahead of them. We'll get into it all as we make our way through Sports Daily.
Champions, I'm Ted the Sports Head.
Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
McKinnon is in at running back. First down and goal to go. Play action fake. Right side throw. Touchdown! Kansas City! McCole Hardman with the catch on the right side. A 3-yard touchdown pass in overtime. Kansas City wins the game 25-22. And the Chiefs Kingdom has started its own history class. Because for the first time in 6,944 days, there is a back-to-back Super Bowl champion, and it is the Kansas City Chiefs, champions of Super Bowl 58 on the heels of Super Bowl 57. The Chiefs do it in overtime.
You kidding me? You kidding me with that? Come on now. Mitch had it right. He's so good. So good. Mitch Holthus on the call. Man, I just, the whole organization and how much fun they're having with this, you just never get the opportunity. And I know they don't take it for granted, but come on now. That's such good emotion. So good. And you heard it on Ted's update before with all the things they overcame. They're going to have to overcome now, Tommy, just an unbelievable offseason of decisions to make. Just on the defense, it's the list of free agents is daunting, led by Chris Jones, Xavier Sneed, and Willie Gay. But there are a lot of others. Edwards is on there. Dan is on there. Like, there are a bunch of them. I can't imagine the young guys either are going to be ready to take a discount. Does Chris Jones now, is he more likely? I think there's a decent chance at that, based on just the emotion of he and Andy Reid last night. If you didn't see Reid pancaking him, I had a buddy send that and say the only pancake allowed on Jones all night, which made me laugh. I think maybe they could work it out with him. The priority obviously needs to be Sneed. Gay's critical too, but I don't know if you can do it. So as you look ahead at the offseason, Tommy, like we all know they need to attack wide receiver, right? You need to attack, but I don't know how much money they can attack it with, because I think they need to attack defense too. They're going to be missing a left tackle. You don't have a left tackle. You don't have one of the best corners in the league. You don't have a great middle linebacker. You don't have one of the best defensive tackles in the league. Like, none of that stuff is secure right now, and you need to attack wide receiver. And you probably need a running back of some kind. Now, those are easier to find. Like, this is an offseason that will be difficult as any they've had to navigate. I know everyone thinks they're just going to bounce right back because, now they're going to go get a receiver. Yeah, maybe they will, but the chances that this defense are as good as it was this year are almost zero.
On top of that, don't forget that they paid quite a bit of money to a guy to play left tackle, and he played right tackle all season, and that was Jawan Taylor. They've got money tied up in that. Donovan Smith is a free agent after this year. He basically played left tackle the entire year. Let's run down this list real quick. You mentioned some of the names: Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, Mike Dana, Willie Gay, Donovan Smith, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon, Drew Tranquill, Mike Edwards, Derek Nottie, Tershawn Wharton, Tommy Townsend, McCole Hardman, Richie James, Blaine Gabbert, Nick Allegretti, Blake Bell, Deion Bush, James Winchester. That's a lot of free agents after this year. That's a lot of them. I mean, that's probably a quarter of your roster is a free agent right now. And so you've got to try to find a way to navigate some of that. Some of these players are more expendable than others. You mentioned it at the top of the show that, there's going to be a difference in the way the wide receiver room looks next season compared to this year. Running back might look a little bit different. Yeah, I don't know if Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't think they're going to probably bring him back, would be my guess. But you've got some really critical players that you got to try to find a way to bring back. And some of them are going to be easier than others. Drew Tranquill, they need to re-sign. They need to bring him back because he's been an unsung hero on that defense basically throughout the entire season. And I think that you could probably get him back. He fits in perfectly in Chiefs Kingdom. I think that you've got to do everything that you can to bring back Snead and Willie Gay. I don't exactly know how that's going to work, but you got to do everything that you can. Mike Dana is another guy that has filled in really well. He played meaningful snaps last night in relief of Charles Omenihu. So there are multiple guys that you've got to try to find a way to navigate in this free agent cycle. But of course, it starts with Chris Jones. What's going to happen with him? Are they going to try to find a way to lock him up for the rest of his career? I would imagine, knowing the way that things went down throughout the offseason last year, that Chris Jones, his agents might be a different story, but Chris Jones probably wants to avoid what happened a year ago. I don't think he wants to go through that again.
Yeah, Chris Jones was not as good this year as he has been in years past. I think if he doesn't want to do that, they're going to have to let him go. They just are. Like that's and that's when you would get into probably that's where you would attack early in the draft. That and left tackle. Like I don't think the Chiefs are coming out and drafting a wide receiver. I don't think that's going to happen. I think because if Chris Jones doesn't want to take the discount based on the way that this thing played out this year, I don't know that with all of these other things happening, I don't think you can give him the big money. They couldn't last offseason. They really can't this offseason. So it's going to need to be something more team friendly. The difference between him and like Xavier Snead is he's had big contracts like this. That wouldn't be, he would probably be more inclined because he's had his big paydays, but he just showed us last offseason he's willing to hold out. So I don't think that it's that simple with him. I think it's the first piece of the puzzle. I agree with you there. It's got to be the first piece, and then you've got to get Xavier Snead signed. Snead's the most important. Maybe Donovan Smith comes back again too, an old veteran player. Maybe he's back. I don't know if he would. I don't know enough about him, quite frankly. The one thing that now lingers, though, for all of these guys is history. You've got a chance for the three-peat. You're like the chance to do that looms. Travis Kelce, Andy Reid, they sound like they're back. Last week, it dawned on me as we were going through some of these rumors, like there is no chance that those guys don't come back for a shot at a three-peat. No chance. They'll be back, right? And maybe it would have been different had the Chiefs not won last night. I don't know. Kelce still won't fully commit to it. On the podium, it sure sounded like he committed to it. And then after the game, he just kept saying, I'm going to enjoy this one. Maybe that's because he's trying to queue up some social media or some announcement on his podcast. I don't know. Who knows? But he'll be back. Reed will be back. Now who else wants to join in on that party, right? You've got Mahomes. You've got Kelce. They're on team-friendly deals, relatively speaking. Would Chris Jones do that? Would Donovan Smith do that? Would Drew Tranquil do that? Would some of these veterans do that? I don't think all of them will, but maybe. The young guys won't, though. Like, I don't know if they can keep Gay and Snead, right? That's going to be a tough ask. It just, like, when I look at it, Tommy, the defense won't be as good next year. In general, it's almost impossible. But it may not have to be because the offense will almost certainly get better, right? You're not going to go draft a wide receiver in the first round, I don't think. Rashee Rice can be your number one. They do need to attack the position, though. And that's where you may get an opportunity for some veteran receivers. Guys, you can come play with Mahomes and have a chance at a three-peat. That will be appealing. That's probably the most likely place where they're going to get a discount. And we saw, look, it's what I'm saying isn't unprecedented. Guys used to do this for the Patriots all the time. Players did this during the Patriots dynasties all the time. They would come in there and they would want to just play a part of that team. And they would join the team and it'd be on a deal that probably made the rest of the league angry. I think that's going to happen with some wide receivers. But like the names you're hearing, like T. Higgins, like that's not going to happen. They've got too many other uses they need for that money. What they'll need to do is go find the veteran wide receivers, right? Probably two good veteran wide receivers that aren't going to break the bank, but that are players you can count on. With the development of Rashee Rice and the return of Travis Kelce, that would be enough. I'm more worried about left tackle. I'm more worried about getting Snead locked up, and then it's probably what happens with Chris Jones. I think that's how I would rank it. And then probably, because I just think it's so likely they'll be able to solve receiver on the cheap that I'm not terribly concerned. I just assume it's going to happen because everyone's going to want to come be a part of it.
I think you can probably get a veteran wide receiver that can actually make a difference.
For
and be
sure
a trustworthy receiver for not a ton of money. I really think that. And then I don't think that it's out of the question at all that the Chiefs, with the 32nd overall pick in the draft, take a wide receiver if it falls to them and they like somebody who's available at that point. That wouldn't surprise me if they use a first-round draft pick on a wide receiver. And then you've got Rashee Rice developing into wide receiver number 1. You've got a veteran to pair along with him. Travis Kelce still there. And then, maybe another rookie that you can develop and bring along. That wouldn't surprise the direction that they go in the first round. But I do know, of course, we're about 2 months away, a little over 2 months away from the NFL draft. They're going to want to have at least some clarity on some of these key pieces between now and then. And I know that the free agent season doesn't actually start until March, so they can't really do anything right now, but they're going to want to have some kind of clarity on where things stand with some of these key positions leading into the draft. That way they know exactly what direction they want to go when that draft actually happens. So I think that, and then that's the way it is every year, but knowing that they have so many free agents that are pending, they've got to figure out a way to navigate all of that. Knowing the secondary and how locked down that secondary has been this season, that was a game changer throughout, every game this year. The way that Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed locked down top receivers across the NFL the entire year, you have to try to find a way to keep Sneed in that roster. You have to.
It's priority.
And regardless of what happens with the rest of that defense, because remember, the Chiefs weren't great in stopping the run this year. They were elite in stopping the pass. And so if you want to try to replicate that as much as you can next season, L'Jarius Sneed is going to be number 1.
He's the top priority. I'm trying to look here. The other issue is 2 off seasons from now. So not this one, but the one following. It also will be a very expensive offseason because now the offensive line has to be paid. What was the one constant throughout Tom Brady's dynasties? Or
his offensive line.
His offensive line. That was the thing that they all, because he was not able to do what he did with a bad offensive line. Now Mahomes is not quite as dependent on that, I don't think, but what was as bad as we've ever seen the Chiefs look, right? That year against the Bucs in the Super Bowl, when their offensive line just got smashed. They're never going to let that happen again if they can help it. So you also have to consider that, right? Now, what will be an interesting collision of crossroads is that you're trying for the three-peat, while in 2 years you've got to get that line secured. That's also looming and pending. If Chris Jones doesn't come on a team-friendly deal, and you could probably, if it's not a 1-year deal or some deal that allows that, they're not going to do, and I told you this last offseason, the Chiefs are not going to do anything that compromises their ability to lock that line up. They're not. And that's a part, it's not just about this offseason. It's about the next one. It's about Trey Smith. It's about Creed Humphrey. They're not going to let those guys get away. And so if you know they're going to do that, that also impacts what they do this offseason. I think that's where it gets really interesting. I would put Sneed in that category of guys that you cannot let go. Of all the guys that we just listed, and there's a ton of them, he is the only one I would say that about. Everybody else is expendable to some degree. They just are. Willie Gay Jr., we've seen him hurt this year, and they've been okay, right? Chris Jones, I hate saying lost a step. I love Chris Jones so much. He was not the force that he has been in years past this year. So, and the other guys, they didn't have before this year really anyway, right? Like Tranquil and all those guys. They went and found those guys. Can they go find other guys? Probably so. You've also got Spagnuolo to boost guys. It's Sneed, and everything else is expendable. it's in the offensive line next year is a big part of that. I don't think they're going to overspend on any lengthy deal except for Snead. Look at the wide receivers that are coming up this offseason. I'm just gonna sort of sort these by yardage. So Mike Evans, it would take a ridiculous, like he just wants to win a Super Bowl. He has a Super Bowl. I would, if I had to bet, I'd bet he goes back to Tampa, but who knows? Michael Pittman Jr. is on that list. He's going to be too expensive. Calvin Ridley, I think technically is on that list. He's too expensive. Gabe Davis, he's one of the, I would imagine he's back in Buffalo. He's one of their guys. Rashid Shaheed, interesting name out of New Orleans. He's a pretty good player. Tyler Boyd's probably too old. T. Higgins is too expensive. Curtis Samuel. You give me some Curtis Samuel. Talk about a player the Chiefs would love, a guy that can run after the catch and double over as a gadgety type player. Absolutely. Hollywood Brown, I think maybe too expensive. Kind of player the Chiefs need, though. OBJ, I think we can probably close the door on that. DJ Chark's going to be out there. Darnell Mooney is a guy I would love to see them take a swing at. You could bring back Demarcus Robinson, who definitely gained something. I mean, it's not an overwhelming list anyway. So that's where you have to look at it and just wonder, like, how do they attack it? Guy like Scotty Miller is in there, right? Names that we know, but it's pretty top heavy. So it will be an interesting wide receiver class to attack. I don't see Pittman or Evans or Higgins or one of these massive names. But, again, Rashid Shaheed, probably pretty handy. I love the idea of Curtis Samuel. I think Curtis Samuel is exactly the kind of player that the Chiefs could. But he may also get expensive because of the market. Who knows? But there will be plenty of guys that you can look at and be like, yeah, that's an upgrade over what they've got.
Yeah, give me Hollywood Brown. If they can find a way to bring him in,
he's going to be too expensive
with his downfield threat.
Sure,
and we saw it. We saw it throughout the entire season. We saw it last night. No team in the NFL currently was concerned about any kind of deep threat with Kansas City. The 49ers were like not concerned whatsoever about Mahomes throwing it deep. He did that one time to Hardman, and it was incredible. That was like the rare time this year that that's actually happened. Here's the thing. With all these free agents that the Chiefs are looking at wanting to re-sign, with the wide receiver class that's out there that are free agents, here is the one thing to look at before any of these decisions are made. This report came down yesterday. I think it got lost in the shuffle because of everything going on with the Super Bowl. Jonathan Jones, insider for CBS Sports, shows up on the NFL Today, some of these other shows. He had a report yesterday that said that it is the number one priority for Kansas City to once again restructure Patrick Mahomes' contract this offseason. The plan would be to restructure his deal, opening up a huge chunk of cap space. They're looking at cutting down his cap hit by more than half. It'd be a simple contract restructure. It would save the team roughly $37 million in cap space, and Mahomes would then have a cap hit next year in the low 20s. If we know anything about Patrick Mahomes, and if we know anything about Brett Veach, they're on the same page on getting those things done. And if they can free up $37 million in cap room to be able to accomplish what they want to do, man, I think that's where you look number one before they end up making any of these decisions. I think they'll probably get it done.
I would imagine so. And this was, it was a lot widely. This was the bad cap year for the Chiefs with Mahomes. And yeah, he's very likely to do that. I just don't know how you use it, though. Are you going to, I think outside of Snead, the most likely place the Chiefs will spend money is for a tackle. Again, the history shows us they are trying aggressively financially to solve that spot. Can they draft? The challenge, I think, Tommy, will be where you pick in the draft and to have to go to free agency first, right? I think the Chiefs would probably love to see what's there and then know what they can take a risk on in the draft. I don't think it's going to be a tackle, though. So I would say if I had to guess, it'll be Snead, priority 1, tackle, priority 2, Chris Jones, priority 3. Willie Gay, probably priority 4A, and 4B would be wide receiver. And you know that you can hit one of those in the draft. I think if you had to say what position, of all those positions, what would likely be the place to find a good player at the end of round 1, it would probably be middle linebacker. So maybe that slides that there. I mean, I think, they've done that with Gay. They've done that with Bolton. They've found good receivers, good middle linebackers in the draft. I don't think they want to risk it on an offensive lineman. And I think that wide receiver can be attacked in different ways. It's more urgent than bringing in another rookie, right? Rashee Rice is your 1. I think you know that. Well, Kelsey's your 1. Rashee Rice is your 2. And so you don't need a 1. You don't need that. So there's no need to overdraft there like they have, or overspend, because they hit on Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice became what they wanted Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore to be. So they've already got that. So I think you go and you just get some veteran savvy in that room, players that are not, the most explosive, but that are very smart, are good blockers, right? And can do some of that stuff. It's going to be Snead, and I think they're going to spend on a tackle again. Whether that's Donovan, maybe it's just Donovan Smith, right? I mean, that would simplify things. I don't know. Is that good enough? Their tackles weren't great this year, and you'd really like to get them better, for sure. But, I mean, am I crazy on the priority list? Snead, then tackle, then Chris Jones, and then receiver and middle linebacker. You're going to lose Tranquil and Gay potentially, so middle linebacker is pretty urgent, but I think that's how I would prioritize it.
I mean, your free agents at left tackle right now, the top one's Tyron Smith. They're not going to sign Tyron Smith.
No,
I don't think. I mean, he's 33. He'll be 34 next season. I think he's too expensive, especially when you have all that money tied Juwan Taylor on the other side, which to this day, I still can't believe that they did that, but it is what it is. And maybe this offseason, the development is to try to get Juwan Taylor finally back over to left tackle. I don't know if that's what they're going to do.
Way.
Well, they paid him the money to be the left tackle.
I know, but
that's why they brought him in for that.
They don't trust him. They don't trust him. I mean, he wasn't good at all this year. I don't think there's any way they would put him on the left side. I mean, look, Donovan Smith signed for $3 million. Would Donovan Smith just come back? Is that good enough, though? I mean, they weren't great on either side. I don't know. The tackles are the tackles in free agency are too expensive. The tackle spot is a tough one to envision on how they'll do it. I don't know how they'll do it. That's just what the history tells us. That's what they'll attack financially. The hardest that it's going to be Snead. You got to get Snead. You have to get Snead. You have to keep Snead McDuffie forever if you can. Like, get Snead now, and McDuffie. What's he, 2 years away? Yeah, he's not as he'll come still in like 3 off seasons, so he's fine. Like, you're not as urgent on him. It's got to be Snead. This is Veach. Roll up your sleeves and hope that there's a lot of really good veteran players that would love to come in on the cheap and try for a three-peat. That's the best case scenario. And I think, honestly, it's probably pretty likely. I do. I mean, Colin Saunders last night was beaming. Like, the guys that have been a part of this love it. I mean, they do. They just love it. They love Mahomes. They love Andy Reid. It's a different sort of relationship. It's awesome. We'll continue the conversation. Can they keep this thing rolling? All of this. It's just a Super Bowl after party here on Sports Daily. 869-1240 is your number to call. Let's give away some HTO on the way out. Free iced tea, free Brewhouse coffee, a card for each of those at 2 locations in Wichita, East and West, and in Derby. Good luck. It's been active out there, so give Jad a call and get that gift on us. We'll keep on partying on here with Chiefs Kingdom on a Super Bowl reaction show of Sports Daily.
Your phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240.
Congratulations, Brian, for winning our HTO giveaway there on this Chiefs Super Bowl celebration show. Glad to be with you on this Monday. Glad for Chiefs Kingdom that you get to do it again. It is a crazy, crazy time. It's a good year for us here on Sports Daily. I got my Rangers World Series championship. Tommy gets another Chiefs championship. It has been a fun year to be a sports fan for sure. It's it's hard not to gravitate to the Chiefs, certainly, and root for their success when you follow it so closely. I think that the villain thing, Tommy, this year was embraced. And it's going to be worse than ever now moving forward. They clearly like it, and Kelsey said it to Jim Nantz after the game, like, put that target right on our back, like, we love it. And that's good. It is as hard a team to make a villain of as I can remember. Kelsey did his part a little bit last year to get some haters, though, when he bumped Andy Reid. Now, that happens, and it's like people are, freaking out a little bit. And I'm like, God, like you clearly have not seen those two dudes interact before. You want to talk about like old school meathead type football. You're talking about two dudes. Like if Andy Reid, had his legs and wasn't 65 years old with a fake hip, like he's getting right in there. He's always done that, especially with Kelsey, because he knows Kelsey responds to that. That's the way Kelsey's wired. Like he's an aggressive dude, and Andy Reid has been aggressive with him and grabbed him and, like put him. So I didn't, when I saw it, even when I saw the replay, I'm like, oh man, Andy Reid didn't see him coming. That's all I thought about it was I'm really glad he didn't fall. He obviously didn't see Kelsey because Kelsey was like gingerly, like he was aggressive, but he was just trying to like grab him by the arm. And Kelsey was probably right, by the way. Don't take me out. Let me block right there. But no big deal. And it would have been made a big deal had they lost. That would have been a really uncomfortable situation to navigate. Those guys don't care about that. That's how they interact with each other. That's just like that's how they communicate always. Historically, that's how that's happened.
I didn't like it in the moment when it happened. And it wasn't that I thought that Travis Kelce was out of line or that there was really for me, it was just in the context of the game as things were going on. I'm like, oh no, they're unraveling. This is what we saw on the sideline against the Raiders and throwing tablets and getting in each other's faces. And, I didn't like it in the moment. I thought that it was a bad look for a team that was in desperate need of some composure at that moment. It was a good thing for them that happened when it did. And it was a good thing for them that it was an extended halftime, because I think it gave them that opportunity to, okay, let's chill out a little bit. Let's make some adjustments. Let's get back out there. In the moment, I didn't like the look. Today, I think it's a non-story. I think that both Kelsey and Reid had good answers for it, and we move
I think
on
it's a
and
story.
It's whatever.
I think it's a story.
But at that time when it actually happened, I'm like, man, I don't think that was the best way to handle the emotions.
When you talk about the game being a microcosm, and look, I was hearing the same sort of thing, like audibly watching it around a group of people, because I watched the first half at home with the kids, and then I drove in and got the second half. And when Mahomes did that interception, everyone's like, oh, that's it. And I'm like, guys, this is a one possession game. Like, what are we? We're not, it's not, or should they go for it on fourth down instead of, and I'm like, no. Like, they made one key mistake in the first half. It was the fumble, right? Otherwise, it was just that kind of game where it was like nothing was breaking through on either side, by the way. San Francisco early moved the ball well. That fumble was just as bad, the McCaffrey fumble, because they were gashing the Chiefs in the beginning of that game. But it was never a point of, and that's why I guess it didn't bother me in the moment. I never felt a point of desperation for the Chiefs, but it really was the same reason, like all year. It's because their defense is just going to bail them out. When your defense is that good, you have the luxury of time to get it figured out. That was their entire season, though. Like, the defense is going to bail you out. The urgency will be lessened because you can count on your defense to go make the big plays when they have to make them. And they did it time and time again in that game. Yeah, the offense never really figured it out, right? It took a fluky punt play to get the thing that finally allowed them to just, take advantage of a mistake. The reason I like the Chiefs in the game is because I thought it was more likely Brock Purdy would make a mistake than Patrick Mahomes. Turns out Patrick Mahomes made the mistake. He threw the pick, but then special teams, the Chiefs won. And they don't get enough credit for how good their special teams was this year. We've talked about it. It's not like we haven't mentioned. It was a part of, the formula that I laid out for him way back when was you take advantage of the fact that you have one of those best special teams units in football this year and lean into that a little bit too. And they did in the game, right? They had great punts. They had great punt coverage. Butker sets the field goal record after Moody set it. Like, it was all there. So when I saw that happen, it never felt like that was anything out of control. It felt like two grizzly bears who communicate with each other that way, communicating with each other that way. It's just that Andy Reid didn't see Kelsey coming. Like, he flat didn't see him coming.
we've talked about the great job that Steve Spagnuolo did. And I think that one of the more overlooked pieces of what Spagnuolo did in calling the defense was the adjustments that they made going into the second half to make Brock Purdy uncomfortable in the pocket. In the first half, Purdy had a ton of time in the pocket, and there was really not a ton of pressure. There was really, not much initial push from the front four defensively for Kansas City. And I thought, Purdy looked pretty comfortable sitting back there in the second half. And this is what the Chiefs defense has done throughout the entire playoffs and basically the entire season, is making those second half adjustments to time the blitzes at the most appropriate time to make Purdy uncomfortable. Now, they didn't really get to Purdy. They didn't really bring him down. There were a number of plays that Purdy kind of scrambled in the pocket and then was able to reestablish himself and throw the ball downfield, but they made him uncomfortable. He didn't get to just sit back there in the pocket. And, I think I saw the stat that in the first half, Purdy was 8 of 10 in passing for 100 some yards. And then from the third quarter, he was like 4 of 11 or something. They really got to him and they really disrupted the rhythm that Purdy was in. I really think too, it's crazy to me that you've got the offensive player of the year in Christian McCaffrey on that team. And he had a good game. Don't get me wrong. He had 150 plus all purpose yards in the game. That's great. But he was kind of a non-factor. He was able to keep drives
just in
alive
the third quarter.
For
the third quarter, he was.
For the 49ers. But we're not talking about him today as the guy that changed the game for the Niners. The Chiefs did what they could do to limit him the best that they could. He still got his to an extent. But then George Kittle, 2 catches, 4 yards. They held
Kittle,
him down.
Ayuk, and Debo were non-factors. And that is such a magnifying glass. So we talked about the glaring mismatch was McCaffrey versus the Chiefs run defense, and it played itself out. But remember, because we've had 2 weeks to talk about it, the Chiefs have been able to overcome that because as long as you don't let those turn into big, long touchdown runs, eventually they're going to force things into a fourth down, right? You might give up 7 and 8 yards, but the one time that you don't and you get them into a third and must pass and you can shut them down, it doesn't matter that McCaffrey just had 40 yards on that drive, in total. So it played itself out that way. And then they get that lead and San Francisco feels like it has to do something to get a big play. And so when you force them to try then to utilize your other weapons, that's where the Chiefs have pounced on teams all year long. The Niners were not as criminally, what the Ravens did was criminal level coaching. Christian McCaffrey touched the ball 30 times, Tommy. He was he was very much a factor. But what the Chiefs defense did such a good job of which it's done all year, is it controls the flow of a game. It forces the other team to do what it's not comfortable doing. And it's like the defense forces teams to play to its strengths and not its weaknesses. And that's, I think, what we saw in that game. I don't know. McCaffrey with 3 carries, I think it was in the third quarter. I think that's the number. That's a problem. But the flow of the game, eventually teams are just we have got to get something going to try and set up big plays. And then you're right there where the Chiefs want you. If Mahomes down double digits in the Super Bowl has got him right where he wants him, which is, kind of becoming this running joke. This year, the Chiefs defense getting late into a game that's very close, it just makes the other team feel desperate. And I think that's all that happens there. And then you're in their wheelhouse. If you're forced to throw on this team, it's as good a 1-2 corner combo as we've seen in a long time. And that's just, and then the timing on blitzes and things like that, that's where Spags comes in, and he just makes it uncomfortable for the opposing coach. He confuses them. He makes them feel desperate. Can we talk about the Chiefs, though, on the offensive side? Never giving in and sticking to their plan, even when it looked like they needed to get desperate. They didn't do it. They couldn't do much with Isaiah Pacheco in the game. He still had 18 carries, right? The target share, it was pretty much all Kelsey and Rice again. Those guys had 18 targets. The other guys, because the game went so long and just sort of played itself out that way, like Mahomes had to throw it 46 times. So eventually, but the priority was still those three guys, and it freed up other guys to make some plays. That's great. That's been the difference, I think, for the team now, is those guys are making some of those plays where they literally weren't making any of them earlier in the year, but the Chiefs stuck to that game plan. They kicked field goals. They kicked a 57-yard field goal. They trusted it, and it all starts with the defense. If the Chiefs are able to three-peat, it will look different next year, because you just don't get defenses like that 2 years in a row. It almost never happens in the NFL. And that was a special defense, and that was a special teams unit. Tommy Townsend's a free agent too, by the way. It was just a special group in both of those places that was it just like, I don't know if, because Mahomes takes so much of the attention, I don't think we will ever truly appreciate how great this defense was this year. This past defense especially, but it was great. Easily the best I've seen, in not even just in the Mahomes era, but in the Andy Reid era. Like, this defense was special. They've had good ones, not like this. They've had great pass rushes. They've had, other elements to defenses. This is the best. They'll never have this defense again, I don't think. It was that good, and I don't think they'll be able to repeat it.
On the offensive side of the ball, I think it was extremely important, too, to have the added wrinkle of Jerick McKinnon back, and how remarkable his recovery was to get back in the game. I mean, there was a pretty critical play where McKinnon was able to convert and move the chains. And, that was extremely important for Kansas City. So having what he brings in the versatility and the pass catching and all of that, that was extremely important too for Kansas City. Isaiah Pacheco, as you mentioned, had a really rough start to the game, put the ball on the turf once. There was the bad pitch, that he dropped and was able to fall on top of. Had a really rough start to the game. It wasn't really until the fourth quarter that he was able to get going, and he had a couple of really big runs where you saw that traditional Isaiah Pacheco running the football, angry, running over tackles, running through tacklers. That's what he does. And when they needed it the most, that's when he was able to step up and do that. And so I was glad to see kind of that redemption. We talked about the McCole Hardman redemption. We talked about the MVS redemption, all of that. The Pacheco redemption in the fourth quarter, after the way that he started that game. You never want that to be the legacy of the Super Bowl when you put the ball on the turf.
Yeah.
McCaffrey did it too. So, it wasn't the
and those were both, by the way,
had a hard time.
Those were good. Those were good defensive plays in both of those situations. They weren't like the dropsies or anything like that. That was the case of two good defenses making, big time plays on those situations. So I will never stop appreciating how good this defense was. I won't, because I think it will never get the credit it deserves as why the Chiefs won a Super Bowl. It'll always be about Mahomes. And Tom Brady had this too. The Patriots had some unbelievable defenses over those years. That defense deserves, at minimum, equal credit for the Super Bowl championship that they just won. And I know the players have been screaming Spags to the rooftops because they feel that too, and they want that to happen. And Andy
Reid should be a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's the only assistant coach in the history of the National Football League to win 4 championships.
Yeah,
the only
coordinator. We don't put coordinators in, so that will be an interesting.
There has never been another coordinator that has won 4 rings, right? And Spagnuolo has.
Yeah, it's do coordinators belong in the Hall of Fame? I guess you can just look at it that way. But I don't know the answer to that. Maybe he'll be a good because I don't think they're done yet. I love watching that defense play, and I hate that part's done, because I don't think we'll ever see another one that good. I just it was just special. Very, very special defense, and a big reason. Just as big as Mahomes, just as big as Kelsey. Any reason that team won the Super Bowl this year, I think the defense may have been the biggest reason.
Yeah, and I want to mention one more thing about Spagnuolo. I remember the Bob Sutton days. And the one thing that the defense has had with Bob Sutton, they weren't clutch. They were a bend, not break defense. And when the big plays mattered, they didn't usually come up when those big plays needed to be done. Steve Spagnuolo defenses do. They're clutch. They've got that clutch.
And they
gene.
did, Tommy, they did it this year without a pass rush.
Yeah.
And their pass rush wasn't good all year.
Yep.
It's crazy, 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 crazy. All right, we'll come back. More Chiefs talk next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back in. Andy Reid solidifying Adam Teicher. He's coming back. Travis Kelce, again, hasn't been as definitive. I would bet you, though, Tommy, that Kelce wants to make that announcement on his podcast. That would be my guess at that. He's coming back. He's not going to not be able to have this opportunity. He's still got plenty left in the tank. He will probably lose another step next year if I had to guess. Now, how much of one? He's still going to be the greatest playing at his age at the position that we've seen, but he's not going to be what he was 2 years ago, for instance.
Well, you know that catch and run that he had at the end of regulation?
That was vintage, right?
I saw a stat. That was his fastest run after catch in the last 7 seasons. So, yeah, I mean, like overall, he's probably lost a little bit of a step.
He's got that one time in a game.
Tank.
Yeah, he's got that one time in a game. Is it going to be all the time? No, but that's okay. Like that, don't misunderstand. He's the best tight end I think we've ever seen. It's him or Gronk, but his longevity over Gronk makes it so. And then he's got the Tony Gonzalez effect of being able to be so effective even at an advanced age when almost nobody is at that position, right? It's one of the most difficult positions to be good at as you get older. So we'll get that news, I'm sure, at some point, but Reid looks like he's secured there. Again, I wonder if it would have been the same for both of those guys had they not won that game. I think there may be a three-peat angle to that a little bit, even though we didn't buy it to begin with. It doesn't matter now, but it's been fascinating to take a look at that over the last few weeks. All right, we'll come back. We'll put a bow on this. We'll tell you what's on the network tonight. You can continue the party with the Chiefs Kingdom show. We'll tell you how right after this. Can't get enough of this Chiefs coverage. You can check out the New Heights podcast with Jason and Travis Kelce. It's free on the Odyssey app. You can get all your podcasts on the Odyssey app, by the way. And then we've got the Chiefs Kingdom show tonight right here on KFH at 6 o'clock. The party will continue all the way through a Valentine's Day Super Bowl parade. So enjoy it, Chiefs fans. It's been an emotional one. Happy for you guys. I really am. What a fun and unbelievable game last night. Tommy, party hard today.
I'm going to go take a nap. I'll be honest with you.
We've reached that. You and Andy Reid going to be napping it up this afternoon. For Jad and Tommy, I'm Jacob. We'll see you tomorrow.